We have an opportunity right now that I don't think's ever happened before that I know of, and that's to get a group of people together that were a part of EMS before it was actually EMS. I don't know if some of y'all understand the history of EMS, but EMS has not been a real profession as long as some people might think. When I was a kid, I don't ever remember seeing an ambulance when I was growing up because there weren't very many of them around. Most people would just call the doctor and they would go to the house or would take their family members to the doctor or to the hospital. It wasn't until I was in high school, I think, was the first time I actually saw an ambulance. And these guys are here today because they just call themselves the old bars, but I like to call them the pioneers of EMS. These guys were in that time of history where we were transitioning from a mother jugs and speed, if you guys are old enough to know what I'm talking about, mother jugs and speed kind of mentality and operations to the professional systems that we have today. So they're going to talk to us a little bit about the transition from those days of the mother jugs and speed to what they have now. I'd like to introduce them. I'm going to let them introduce themselves a little bit more, but you got Hugh Brannon there on the far right. Hugh Brannon was in the first paramedic class, and because of the letter B, he became paramedic #1. So he is actually the first, I guess, certified paramedic in the state of South Carolina. Fred's been in the ambulance service for quite a number of years, back in the, I think, what did you say, 64?
65.
65, I'm sorry, I was making him older than he really is. He actually helped establish the North Pole EMS.
Take care of everything.
So he has a lot of experience with little people like we're talking about today. But he was the Woodhill Mall Santa, for you guys that remember way back when I was a kid. He was the Woodhill Mall Santa for many years. And for a while he was Lexington County deputy coroner. That was really interesting when you would have a patient that passed and Santa Claus would show up. Yeah, Henry Pettit. Henry Pettit was vice president of Paramedic. Is that correct? And he wrote the proposal that helped establish Lexington County EMS, or Lexington County Ambulance Service back then. He's going to talk about that a lot. And then we have our own John Winmore. John started in 1976, is that right? So he is our longest serving employee, and I hope he remains that way for quite a while. Because when he leaves, I'm next. You can't retire, John, right? You cannot retire. All right, but that's these guys. I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Pettit now, who will carry us home from here.
All right, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Can you see me? Not that that's important. I wrote this down. Actually, I go back in ambulance service before EMS, and I had in the outline that before EMS, emergency medical service systems were fairly new after the mid-60s, late 60s. Before that, before EMS, you had service provided by a range of things, everything from general homes, which people trusted because they were clean and reliable, private ambulances, which were anywhere from very, very good, for instance, Eric Ingman in San Francisco, to mother jugs and speed, and I saw too many of those. Too many people dying in the wings because people were not trained. There were no regulations back in the early 60s. Paramed was Tom Hallfish and myself. It started, he hired me because I knew all there was to know at the time about handling the people in ambulance. The thing that an ambulance did was transport people. There were no regulations. If you needed it, you bought a first aid card. So Tom was an independent naval hospital corpsman who had gotten out of the service. The independent corpsman, the independent Navy hospital corpsman, was the highest trained medical professional in medicine under a physician at the time. And in fact, most of everything that exists in training for EMT and paramedic was based on naval hospital corpsman training. This goes back into the early 60s. So Tom hired me, and we combined. He taught me what I needed to know about medicine, and I taught him what he needed to know about handling people and moving people. That was the original growth of what became emergency medical service. Our original dream, we used to talk about this many times, was wouldn't it be great when we could have something called a paramedic? This was back when you guys were called ambulance drivers. And you probably still are. There probably people that want to insult you and probably call you that now. But
Some things haven't changed.
yeah. So Tom and I made it a purpose to develop training. At the time, there was a National Ambulance Training Institute, which is part of the American Ambulance Association, had a training program. And because of the influence of Tom, I realized that one thing that was missing was a way to test people. There was no testing. I developed the first testing program that went with a system that trained people for ambulance service. I was in the second class, actually the first class where non-nurse or physicians were involved or allowed to be in it. I was in the first class that was taught CPR by James Jude, who was the person that developed the concept of CPR. By James Jude, who was a physician, and several other people. I was in that in Baltimore City hospitals, including the dog labs, which they don't allow anymore. Too many other things that work really well. So I'm proud of the fact that I was trained to do CPR by the guy that invented it, or came up with it. We came in here in 1968, and this man is the first guy that was ever in a professional EMS ambulance service in South Carolina. He worked for a fellow named Roddy Brandeis for the ambulance service that existed in Columbia that we were brought in by the city to replace. We developed that, is where the growth came, and then one night, several years later, Fred may remember this, got a call that the funeral homes were going out of business in Lexington. Could we please take it over? Well, you know how many calls you guys run? Try doing that and then adding Lexington with 3 ambulances. But it was fun working 24 on, 24 off, 24 on, 24 on, 24 on. Right, Fred?
It wasn't fun.
In fact, Fred just reminded me that the first call that was run by the system, the 2 of us were on that call. And the second call.
That was the Carolina Ambulance Service.
Carolina Ambulance.
They took over from the Columbia Ambulance Service.
They took over from that. The Carolina Ambulance was hired by the city. As I put it then, we used our brains and their money.
They didn't
How'd that work?
They didn't have much money.
But we developed a system, which was Carolina Ambulance, developed reporting. We were able to document, like in cardiac arrest, we had one of the highest save rates in the country, despite our limitations as far as money. And we went through and we did everything we could. And when Lexington came in, I wrote the document here. This is a document that was presented to Lexington to develop a system for them. And the understanding originally was, you guys are going to have to take this over. This isn't something you can do from running for Richland County or from Columbia. It has to be done in Lexington. So that was what we originally did. This is the original documents that were written for the Department of Transportation and the federal government to develop the EMT training programs nationally.
This document is on our website, the Paramedic proposal. This is I guess, the foundation for Lexington County EMS that he wrote for us.
We had a bunch of questions. Fred, why don't you answer a couple of them?
Let's see. Got under my name. First, let me tell you about myself. I started with the ambulance service in 1965. And the reason I did, because I couldn't find nothing else to do. Nothing else out there. Making $32.50 a week, 24 hours a day, 6 days a week. I had off, and I was married with children. Yeah, I don't know, I only had off on Sunday. Had the kids come up and visit me in the evening time, the only time that you was. I stayed with the Columbia Ambulance Service on up to 1968. Back then, it was just put on a stretcher and go. There's no such thing. They would not even allow us to have stethoscopes. They said, you're not a nurse or a doctor, you don't need a stethoscope. That's the way they felt about it back in those days. Like I said, Brandy's took it over, started the ambulance service in '64, I believe. He was out of Charlotte, North Carolina. He had a group in Charlotte and a group in Asheville. And we ran Corvair vans. Any of y'all ever seen Corvair vans? With the rear engine drive. That means when you open the back door up, you have to pull the flap up to the engine, but put it down and set the patient right on top of it, lay the patient right on top of that. That was terrible. Those things were a little sucker real fast. They were air-cooled engines. Then in '67 or so, we got Dodge, some kind of Dodge vans. They give us the stick, not stick shift, but the automatic stick on the column, on the console, or dashboard, excuse me. It had first, second, third, no, and then drive, Weirdest thing you ever seen. But that was the wrong thing to do, put that in the hand of some of those paramedics, well, ambulance drivers back then. It hit that first, you hit it first gear, and then you push it up to second, push it up to third. A few of them got a lot of tickets like that, I believe. Back in those days, the only training we had was advanced first aid. And half the people didn't have that because they didn't stay there long enough to get it. And one man that was most influential in my life, he's the one that got me interested in wanting to better the place, make it a little better. His name was Claude Bedingfield. He was a Columbia City Police Department officer. He did a lot of, you remember Claude Bedingfield? Yeah. He's been long since passed away. He's the one that really got me interested in the emergency medical portion of this. In 1968 come along, everybody, they couldn't keep a manager in there because they couldn't pay them for anything. I was the only one that agreed to take the manager job at $32.50 a week. The only reason I took it because I could sit there with my feet propped up all day on the desk. I got hired by Carolina Ambulance and Paramedic Henry and Wayne and Tom Hullfish and G.C. Robinette came in one day and called me at my worst. I was sitting back in the ambulance, had a little round beanie cap on. I was sitting playing with something, I don't know what it was, had my feet propped up, and they come in and talked to me, and I put in an application to go to work for them. We talked for a bit. And why, I don't know, but they agreed to hire me, and I'm glad they did, and I've been in it ever since. I stayed in the EMS 30 years. On my 30 years, well, 1 month past my 30 years, I hit my retirement date, and I was gone. I had enough EMS, and I turned around and went to work for the coroner's office here in Lexington County as a deputy coroner. Went to work for, back then it was FEMA, now it's Health and Human Services for the federal government. I went to work for DMORD as a medical legal investigator, which is, plain words, is deputy coroner. This is on a federal level. I responded to the World Trade Center. Had 2 tours of duty over World Trade Center for about 60 days. And since then, I've had a lot of heart problems. I've retired since then. Did I have any inkling that EMS would become so advanced or blossom into what it was now? I knew EMS was into something good because it was so bad. I had no place to go for that. No place to go for that. It took us a few years. Once Henry and his group got in there and got us all organized, got us physicians. I think our first medical patrol was David Coon, Dr. David Coon. I think he might have passed through it.
The first true medical control from the paramedic level was Joe Fishman.
Oh, wasn't it?
And McCurdy.
And McCurdy.
McCurdy Fishman. And we had fun because they let us do pretty much what we did. In fact, there's a funny story about that. These guys were in the paramedic class. I didn't make the first cut because I lost the flip of a coin. Wayne Vestal and
He had to
I.
work.
Yeah.
Well, I was in charge of the system, but Wayne was like the operations manager. But there had to always be somebody in charge of it. So it had to be Wayne or me. So we flipped a coin and Wayne went to the first class. I'm paramedic number 14. So we got a call from the Blamey drag strip. And I had a fellow by the name of McVeigh, who was a dispatcher and EMT occasionally. And these guys were in class. We went to the drag strip. The guy had cleared the end of the strip and cleared a fence and hit a tree about 12 feet in the air. And he lived, by the way, no thanks to my driver.
We have Life Pack 4 in front of us here. What kind of EKG monitors were y'all using before the Life Pack 4?
The big bricks.
Data scope?
All we ever used was a LifePak 4, but I remember those units, they were big metal box.
So how did the data get transmitted? Right now, we're using Bluetooth technology to go through our cell phones.
So, Blackback 4, they had a...
We had, the LifePak 4 had a thing on front of it, you could take and set a telephone on top of it, but we never hooked them up. They had not been, I mean, I don't think they were used until we changed technology. You know, we read the script and told you know, what we thought was there, but those things, you know, it was a telemetry type system. But,
That thing went back and forth. Sometimes they let paramedics read the thing, and other times the doctor at the hospital wanted to telemetry.
it depended a lot on who was at the ER at the time.
And the first group of paramedics, we had it real good because the doctors that helped train us were the ones that answered on the other end of the radio. So they knew what we were capable of.
And they would come ride calls with me occasionally, so they got to see what we were doing in the field, and so it was a two-way street. So they completely trusted you if you called in V-fib. There wasn't any question that you had V-fib. It's whatever you were saying, they said, yeah, that's what it is. And then you had a standing order, you did whatever it was called for.
In Lexington County, they had all the paramedics' names there, and they had check marks beside them. If you screwed up on one call, they wanted to see the EKG then, and not if you interpreted to them. They'd tell you to send one to them. If you screwed up, the documents put a check mark beside you.
Check mark was good.
Yeah. But I wish Barry was here, Barry Valentin, but talking about like Henry's, they told him to start IVs. I can't remember if Barry was in the second class, it was with you guys, and I can't remember if it was during the class and he was on shift, or if he had finished and Barry and Marvin Boyd used to ride together. And they had a cardiac arrest and couldn't get vein. And the doctor, I think it was somebody substituting from the VA or something, he said, you know how to do an IC up nothing? Barry and Marvin looked at each other and yeah, well, how? Yeah, because we'd gone through that, though we didn't know if we were ever going to do them. And I said, do one.
These guys may not know what you're talking about.
I'm talking about an intercardiac.
The needle?
Yeah, an intercardiac after
Pulp Fiction style?
Yeah. all of our epi then came that way. So we'd have to, break the needle off to do things. But they asked, did we have it, and did they have it, and know how to do it? And I said, sure, and they did that. And I'll never forget. Barry said, Marvin looked at the patient and says, "You got veins now."
We still have those ampules with the needles on when I started here, but we never could do the
I think that was the only one that ever been done.
We started our training for Carolina Ambulance August 15, 1968. We only had 2 weeks to train all the people. I was the only one with actual ambulance experience other than Henry and Wayne, and I think I brought a guy named Don Duck.
Yeah, Don.
Don't get into him. We
belonged to a certain motorcycle.
Yeah, we went 2 weeks training. We did some hard training for 2 weeks, and we did defensive driving out on the Columbia Airport runway. And it was 5 feet off the ground. It was 120 degrees off of the asphalt. It just run us down, but on midnight, September the 1st, on that very first midnight at the end of August, we took over. And the other private ambulance service went out of existence. We were all standing outside to celebrate taking over at 12 o'clock. About 20 minutes to 12, the Columbia Ambulance made their last call, and they come down the street and rode right past us. And they're out waving at us, laughing at us, blowing the siren. 12 o'clock, we went to bed. Think about 1, we got our first call. It was a false call, which I later found out was called in by the old Columbia Ambulance. They knew I was on first call that night, so they go, but we got a second call around 4, and it was the DOA. And then come 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, it was time to change call position. We went from first call out all night long to third call out that next morning.
So you had 3 units on duty?
3 units
Covered all
on
of
duty.
Columbia?
We had 3 regular ambulances. They were all designed, had the decal and everything on. We had 1 blue Ford van. No, it was just like an ambulance, but it didn't have the decals on it. And we had a 1964 Pontiac ambulance. It looked almost like a hearse. And we all used to, they saved it for just emergencies that the other ones would give out. We'd come up with all kinds of excuses to put out a regular band in the shop so we could drive that big old hearse. It had a big coaster siren on it. And a coast siren, you operate by foot pedal or by horn. And once it gets up to the loudest, you can be on the scene 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and it still be going out. Doing CPR in van was, we trained real good CPR. We had some real good people doing CPR. Yeah, just like that.
You got to go look at them later. That dates back.
Doing CPR in one of those things was impossible. The roof was that far from the patient's face. Yet we managed to do it several times. We finally, I don't know what happened to that thing. We wore it out. It broke down on that a couple of years.
As far as you guys are concerned and how it started in the background, again, as Henry said, the county had contracted with Paramedic to get a service started. So there was a template that they had been using around the country, and that was pretty much what we started here. December 3rd, 1973, 16 of us started training for EMTs, and we did 8 hours a day for 2 weeks. And it was in an upstairs room of the Baptist, the Baptist church there right beside the administration building. The building that it was in is gone now, but what was the guy's name? Big guy. There was only a handful of EMTs workers, but Tom. It was a great big man. I can't remember. He taught the course, and then
Al Futrell?
no, it wasn't Al. But anyway, we went through an EMT course in 2 weeks, and then they assigned us to vehicles. It was kind of interesting. One of my questions is, why did I get interested in a career in EMS? I was broke, I had a baby, I was living in a trailer, and I was making $2.50 an hour driving a delivery truck. I did some diving, scuba diving back then, and ran into a guy from Carolina Ambulance, Russ Thayer, and I said, they're advertising for jobs over in Lexington County. What kind of work is this? And we talked for a while, and I said, I think I'll try to do that. The ad in the paper said paramedic. There was no such thing as paramedics, but the ad said paramedic, $8,076 a year. And all the guys I finished school with BA degrees and administration were making like $6 grand working for banks and stuff, and I thought, well, that's a good deal. So I applied and got hired, and we finished that class. In January 1st, 1974, we started the service. We had 4 units. 3 of them were, I guess, y'all's old units, Carolina Ambulance units. They were old Ford vans. They had blue plywood shelves and cabins built into them. And then we got one that was a real ambulance that came from the, I think it was what we bought or was donated from the Batesburg Rescue Squad at the time. And so we had a station at Swansea, we had a station at the Irmo Fire Department, we had a station at the airport, and then one in Batesburg, Leesville. And those were the 4 areas. It was years before we actually ever put one in Lexington. But
Now the airport unit,
yeah,
that's where we get our Metro from. You guys here
Yeah.
are talking about Metro.
yeah, that was the Metro
That Metro
unit.
unit is.
And that was also kind of our original tie to helicopters, because we were housed in the same area with the MASS group, the Army MASS group, and so their medics would come ride with us, and then they developed a program that we could call them and use them.
By the way, that took active.
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah.
Does everybody know who Floyd Spence was? He was from Lexington. He was a United States representative. When we originally came up with the idea of using helicopters, these were the MASS program helicopters, fully equipped, pilots, medics, everything, sitting at the airport. The only time they flew was on training. And it occurred to us that we were talking about going to Batesburg, Leesville, or wherever, anywhere in the 2 counties out in the rural areas, took forever to get there. So why not use the helicopters? Well, we thought we were asking for the national budget. And we finally said, okay, we'll play the game that they like to play, so we called Floyd Spence and Strom Thurmond. And since Floyd was from here, I mean, he was Lexington County, guess who won? So that's what he's talking about, when they had the relationship with the helicopters, and, well, they didn't like it, but they got used to it.
And these helicopters were, and the crews were actually left over from Vietnam. They were all come back, decommissioned from Vietnam. They had nothing to do with them. That's one of the reasons we got them too. They had to find places for them to go. And it used to be when you get to the scene by the ground and you have to call in that helicopter and it come in. It was a fight between the 2 crew members who was going on that helicopter. And being I was the biggest one, I won it.
Yeah. Well, you were also the supervisor.
So that was quite something. They tried landing, I got a heliport there at Providence now, and they got one in Richland, and they got one in Lexington. They tried to do one at Baptist. Across the street is the parking garage from Baptist, y'all know that. It used to be on the top floor of the Baptist Hospital. They had to cancel that and discontinue that because all the businesses around. They were coming in so many times a day and it caused such a ruckus of big old helicopters that they closed it down with them using the helipad.
But, finishing up a little bit about Lexington County, I was here, we started in '74, and I went to the first paramedic program and finished that. Right before the
How long was that
program, they said was 256 hours.
3 months,
But it was,
3.5 months.
yeah, we were working 24 on, 24 off. So we would get off in the morning, go straight to the training and train all day long, eight full hours, and then we'd do clinicals. Later on, we'd do clinicals after that, and then go home, go sleep, get up and come back. And you did that for, like I said, 3 or 4 months. Seemed like a whole lot more than 256 hours to me.
You got every other Sunday off.
We had like, I think it was 1 Sunday a month, or the way it worked out, something like that we had off. But and we didn't get paid for going to class.
Oh,
That was, you were privileged to be able to do that.
Don't let you do it.
I'll tell you what, the divorce rate was very high back in those days when the EMT, because of the hours they had to keep.
And back then also, there was no females doing EMS.
Oh, no. Oh, that was much later that we went through that.
Yeah.
Between you and your training beats.
That's another thing that hasn't changed.
Yeah.
Our training for CPR, mobile CPR, Henry came up with the Carolina Coliseum. Those stairs go way up to the top. It had a recessor Annie. It didn't weigh enough, so they put about 100 pounds of sandbag on the stretcher. But the patient supposed to have a heart attack, had to start two-man CPR, and then call in the other crew, and the other crew come in, we had to tow them all the way down those stairs while still doing hand CPR. It wasn't easy, and matter of fact, well, I think we lost a few, this is before we became paramedics, we lost a few EMTs on account of that. They couldn't handle the physical part of
it. As far as Lexington was concerned, you mentioned about that we were already in the county administration building then. That was years later. But one of the things, as Henry said, I ended up being director, or whatever we call it then, EMS coordinator. I was shift manager, operations manager, and EMS director, and then deputy director of public safety. But having that everybody could do what they do, even at that point, and I don't know what it's like now, I have no idea, but our public safety director, who was over fire and EMS and everything, he went to the paramedic program as well. So that was Chuck Whitehead, and of course, all of our management had to be that. Now, like I said, I never would ask somebody to do something that I wouldn't or couldn't do, but I got to tell you, I was in EMS management for probably the last 8 or 9 years that I was there, and I was a much better manager than I was a paramedic. Everybody's got their skill sets, and knowledge-wise, skill-wise out there, I watched Brennan and Cato and a lot of these other guys and stuff, and I ran calls with them as well. I jumped calls, and you know when some people are better than you are, and it was more natural to them being out there. Fortunately, like I said, I was a good manager, and I guess I got where I was supposed to be. And I stayed in it for 12 years and got out in 1985, and mainly because of politics. But you must have left right before I showed up. Yeah, I was going to say I started in April. I was going to ask you, it would have been me that hired you because I would have been public safety. But the first director was John Driggers, yeah. And what I understand, he was a paramedic employee. Yeah, he had been down in Aiken, I believe. So he came from Richland. Paramed set up the system, and you guys were employed by Lexington County with paramedics the management. Yeah, how long did that last? Well, we had a trailer that we put like beside the parking lot where the county administration building is now, but it wasn't there. And I can remember Henry coming in like once a month or once a week or something like that, getting our paperwork and auditing things and that sort of stuff. I broke my hip on a motorcycle with a bunch of the guys, and so I got moved to light duty inside. So I was in the middle of all that, and probably one of the reasons I was able to move up to management. But Henry, I think that lasted what, a year? Yeah, we moved from that trailer. Then our offices moved over to the old jail. And I think from that point on, I don't remember how it happened, but John resigned, and I think at that point Don Simmons took. We had John, and we had 2 shift managers, and so they moved Don to EMS. I think that's when we started calling it coordinator instead of director. Don Simmons and Bunny Ard, yeah, they were the 2 shift supervisors, and they had a supervisor's vehicle that I understand was a Ford Pinto. White Ford Pinto. You ought to jump calls in a white Ford Pinto. Did it have emergency lights on it? I'm just picturing that. I don't remember that we did. We got not long after, well, when John Driggers resigned, we ended up getting his car, which was a Plymouth station wagon, and it did have a light bar on it.
They didn't want to wind up sirens too.
It was, yeah.
Q2, a small Q2.
Yeah.
So when Riggers resigned, who became the first Lexington County director?
That was Don. And we stayed in Lexington County, as ambulance, and then EMS, we had the little footballs that were Lexington County on it. And then they built the administration building, and we moved over there. Yeah.
That was paid.
Where did you wear that?
On the sleeve.
On sleeve?
Left, right.
I don't remember.
No, it was on the left.
And when
And
you,
then the EMT patch on the other side.
do you recall what year we became Lexington County EMS?
Yeah, it was as we were moving into the administration building, which would have been like 75, 6, 70, maybe around 76. And then just as soon as we got into the building, we had offices on the 4th floor. That's when they decided to make a public safety department. And Paul Cornwall, who was retiring from the sheriff's department as a detective, took over as the public safety director. And Don Simmons was EMS coordinator, and Louis Sile was the fire coordinator. And that was the way that structure started, and that was in probably late 1976. Don left. I was Don's operations manager. Again, we were still following the Carolina Ambulance, you know, and it was becoming Richland County Ambulance,
Richland County
EMS. I mean, but you know, our programs, and probably most all the programs in the state, because it all started here in the Midlands, that we had the first at least 2 or 3 paramedic programs that started here.
The first two.
First two.
Yeah, they were all concentrated here, so all of our ways of doing things really came from Carolina Ambulance, which came from Paramed, and just kept getting, you know, so we kept so much of that stuff for so long, and then, you know, developed from it. But we had the operations center in the basement, and then we moved public safety all the way down there for a while. Paul Cornwall resigned, and they hired Chuck Whitehead, who was retired from SLED and was head of Midlands Central Region Planning Commission, who we got a lot of grants from. And then I moved from EMS coordinator then to deputy director of public safety. Cato, I think, you know, Mike Cato became the director then of EMS for a while and didn't like it. He wanted to go back on the shift as a shift manager. And do many of these people know who Mike Brannon is? Or?
No, probably not very many. How many of you know who Mike Brannon is?
Mike,
Wow,
Mike was one of the most colorful characters I've ever known in my life,
to say the least.
But he was also, you know, very involved in forming some EMS ideas and what needed to be done, and started systems up in North Carolina early doing paramedic type skills. But Mike did not want to be in management at all. You know, he just wanted to be left alone, run calls, take his month off during the crop dusting season and go crop dusting and then come back. But I wanted him to be EMS director or EMS coordinator, and the only way I could get him to take the job was I threatened to give it to somebody else that I knew he couldn't work with. So he took the job.
Tell me about who that was later.
I will later on. He took that job by default, and then I think he hired Tom Gross, I believe, and Tom came was training originally and that kind of stuff. We just kept going.
Brennan was the director when I started. Mike Cato was my supervisor.
Yeah.
When Mike Brennan was working with us over in Richland County, he and I think, Henry might have been on it, there's Wayne and 4 or 5 others, we had a para-rescue team. We all learned to skydive. And we all trained down in Barnwell County at the airport.
And over in Camden.
In Camden, we had to do some night jumps. When my brother was in on it too, he was one of the first EMS employees, but Charlie made 25 jumps and never landed in an airplane. First time he ever went up, he jumped out, and every time after that, he jumped out. One day he was going up, the plane made a ground loop, and it was tipped over, and he got out, pulled away his parachute, and he ain't been back in one since.
That was the first brother teams in EMS in the state.
Mike Drennan was...
Is Charlie still working with the
No, he got
towing service?
Yeah, towing service over
So
there, called McCurdy Towing.
Yeah, you guys, especially in the south, and I think you work more in the south there, when they see him. You see McCurdy towing, that older fellow there.
Mike Drennan was, he was in Vietnam. That's one thing that made him so colorful. He was a gunner on a helicopter.
think he spent 4 tours there, if I remember.
He did a lot of work over him, the guy named Curry Haynes, I don't know what you
Yeah.
remember Curry, he was in there.
Yeah.
They were all pilots over there.
In fact, the way Mike approached doing Project Pararescue was, that was a great way to support the expenses of jumping. So we got,
Paid for his jump.
yeah, Project Pararescue was designed, according to Mike Brennan, paramedics with certain types of equipment could jump into rural areas where you couldn't get land units or people in the real quickly. So a paramedic parachute could get in there right away. So that's how Mike justified it. That way you could pay for the plane, you could go up and just do all these fun jumps.
So we had specialty teams way back before.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm talking about, using the automation, come up with new ideas. It just might be one that means something.
Mike, if I had to, I was involved in Lexington County from 73 to 85, and then somewhat involved for numerous years after that because I left the EMS career and went into medical sales. So I ended up making a lot of money off all you guys. Monitors, defibrillators, and all kinds of things like that.
You brought us from the Philly, Colorado, having a display case out there to it was then the California Medical
Yes.
Stiff Neck Education College.
But if I had to say, when did Lexington County really start rocketing and changing the way to do it, it would have been during Mike's term as director. He's probably the most influential person as far as you guys being and doing what you are today. He started, high-level rescue teams. He started all the specialty stuff that was done. We had exercise, PT and things like this, but yeah, it was. But I would say, like I said, I saw pretty much everybody up until then and kept up with things for a long time. And I know it's wonderful now what you guys do. I've been on the scene of a number of calls that I just happened on or was involved with my family, or John's had to come pick me up. So, I know what you do and I know how you're doing it and what goes on here. But I would say that a lot of that is owed to Mike Brennan and the way he aggressively took over things. Mike's biggest comment most of the time, he would never say, "I'm sorry." He'd always say, "I'm sorry I got caught." And he got things done, that I just didn't want to know. Just don't tell me, just go get it done. And he really did a lot for this county and this service.
Well, something that carried over into the development in Lexington County was from Richland County. We had the biggest bunch of cowboys you'll ever find in your life. That was a different era. If you did stuff now like we did things then, you all would be in another profession because they'd fire you.
Did y'all hear that? He needs to repeat that one more time. Just want to make sure we get that on
Some of the
record.
stuff, you just,
Watch some other
Not
judges.
only Richland County, Lexington County was doing that too.
Yeah.
Was.
A lot of times, if you had a disagreement at shift change about what was in the truck or not, a fight just broke out there. That was the way, and we learned that from them, because that's the way they were doing it.
this is the old days, this is the cowboy days.
3 o'clock in the morning, you'll be in bed asleep, you get a call, you get out and you've been working all day on a 24-hour shift. You're just winding down the day, you get in bed, and you get a phone call, got a call such a place, and all of a sudden, all 3 ambulances get called at the same time. Henry, right down the street, sitting there timing how long it takes us to get out of here.
Yeah, Drennan used to do that same thing. I guess he
You learned it.
He learned
He used to do the same thing. He'd call several of us up to come to Station 10 in the middle of the night and just to chat, just because he was bored.
When Lexington County first started, they had Batesburg, Lee, Swansea, and the airport. That's when Carolina Ambulance was taken.
And you close watch a lot. And truck road.
We had-
We
had the
run
rescue
calls
squad.
out of the health centers there in those towns.
And
And some of those boys come home with all kind of wild stuff, sleeping in those beds. Same bed we slept in with a patient examining beds every day. It was rough. Of course, the only biggest help we had was Pediatric Rescue Squad. We didn't have to worry about that around people. had it, that it took care of you real good.
When the early days of starting off, we were really bumping heads with the rescue squad. I mean, a lot of them didn't want us here. The fire departments, other than we went in, we operated out of the Irmo Fire Station. We bridged some gaps that way, but it was years. It was until we got into the public safety concept where the fire service and management things of it were all in one area. But for a long, long time, you might go to a call in Batesburg and you'd almost have to get a fight with the Batesburg Rescue Squad about who's going to take the patient. That wasn't unusual.
We're still doing that.
But we had, I told you about our initial pay was like $8,000 something a year. I thought that was great, but it didn't dawn on me at that time until I took the job that was 168 hours in 2 weeks. And that's 80-something hours a week. So, the pay was better than, a lot, but you worked a lot. But we had this thing that came over from Paramedic called overtime. And if you ran a call after 11, yeah, if you ran a call after 11 o'clock at night, after you'd already laid down in your nice little bunk and gone to sleep, you got overtime while you were out. Well, if you ran multiple calls and you could make that 180 minutes or 3 hours that you were out, then you got overtime for the whole night, 8 hours of overtime. And you talk about some people going 12, 15 miles an hour to the substation to get that 8 hours, because that was cool, man. 8 hours of time and a half. On
So when you went to bed at 11 o'clock, from that point on, if you didn't want to call, you were not paid.
No.
No. Of course, in Richland County, it didn't really mean anything because you ran calls all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Population being so many more. 24 hours, you might get a couple hours sleep. Yeah, I remember I spent a day in night checking on people.
Oh, yeah, we'd get calls from the dispatcher asking our 1020, we'd obviously have to lie, but there was no such thing as GPSs and things like that. Nobody knew where we were. Nobody knew who was at the stations a lot of times. And as I got into management, we found out, you're talking about females being in EMS, they were in EMS long before they were employed at some of the stations.
Again, that's been
Certain parts of the county.
In fact, to show you where you can be innovative and create things, when we came in here, there was no way to find streets. The fire department had some maps that had been modified, but it was really difficult. You go into an area, like when I came to Columbia in '68, I'd never been to Columbia before, so learning the street systems and all, there was no system. So we talked to the city, and they let us use their computer. I was told I had to write a program for this computer to create a map book, which was also to be used to analyze calls, where they came from. So the idea is to figure out where do you need to put the ambulances. So I was introduced to a computer. This is in 69, 68, and 69, in a room, huge room. It felt like it was 20 degrees, and this thing out of science fiction, the big reels and stuff. I couldn't even spell computer, but we created a system there that analyzed every call and used what's called a queuing theory, which Dunlap and Associates and us used to develop some of this. Queuing theory is how long does somebody, is they willing to stand in line to be waited on at a retail store. We applied that to emergency services and how long will it take an ambulance to get somewhere based on where an ambulance is stationed. So we used the first computer program of its kind, was Richland, Lexington County, to come up with something that resembled a map book, which I don't know that you guys, what do you use now?
We have some old paper maps. We also use commercial atlases, and we have mobile data terminals that have a mapping system in there.
But you have something really good.
Oh, yeah, we have something.
But back then, what we had was good.
Every month, or actually it was every day, one of my jobs when I was first in, and I was walking around crutches with broken hips and motorcycle accident. I had to take a map and pin every call on the map so that when we got through with the month, we would have a representation of where it was, and we used colored pins with, some of them being like, things like blue was transport, red was emergency, and things like that. But it was interesting. We did that. We literally did that for years and years, and it was interesting. We'd take pictures of the map so we'd have them, and you could it was amazing to watch the growth of the number of calls, coming across and everything. And I don't even remember, John, how many units did we have when I left there? 6?
Yeah.
Yeah, 6. Yeah.
Because then they added on Chapin and finally put a truck in Lexington.
Well, we had a truck in, Lexington. Yeah, so when I left in 80.
We had 7 when I started here, maybe 5.
No,
Unit
you're
2
right, we
was-
did have 7, I forgot, yeah.
Unit 2 was the.
Unit 2, yeah.
Was the extra truck.
Right,
It
yeah.
would be
So
the
when
first
I
to shut
left
down.
when I left in 85, I left in February 85, and we had 7 units. So what do y'all got now?
About 7 or 8.
Yeah, 7 to run.
We have up to about 15 during the peak times.
How many of you guys are planning on retiring from EMS, working long enough to retire?
Some of them work, one of them's worked long enough to retire now, just won't. And,
Jimmy Green was one of the original paramedics on the police here. He's Director Spartanburg.
Yeah,
He's still around.
Yeah, he's still in it.
Do you recall who the first female in Lexington was?
Was it Nita Keesler?
That name is.
Sid Hughes' wife,
Yeah, well, but,
David,
she that's right, she was probably the first female, but wasn't Nita the first, she was the first Lexington female paramedic, I think, as far as paramedic. Yes, sir. Of
When did medical clubs become a mainstay? I mean, I know you talk about the 60s, grabbing people and going. Medical calls, I know bloodborne pathogens weren't a big thing back then with AIDS virus, things like that. But when were gloves standard for you guys? Gloves.
After 85.
I could answer that. In 1992, OSHA came up with the bloodborne pathogen standards, and Mike Drennan told me to write the SOP. So I wrote the SOP. When I first started here, we had gloves, but the only time we would use them if you had a crappy paint, literally crappy paint.
Right.
It was not unheard of. That was a badge of honor to have your clothes all bloody.
Oh, yeah, that was cool.
That was cool.
Shit, more blood, you had on him, meant more work.
Yeah.
About the only time,
1992.
in the early days, about the only time we ever put gloves on is if we're delivering a baby. Yeah. And the only gloves we had were in the OB kit, weren't they?
Yeah.
They were sterilized.
Yeah.
Single,
And our first mini CPR course I took back before I came to Lexington County, before we started out, we had to do mouth to mouth on each other. And my brother was my partner. Paramedic training, the way we practiced IVs initially is we stuck each other. Y'all still do that? But then our clinicals, and I don't know what you guys did for clinicals, we had clinical rotations, we were in the ERs, and then we were also in surgery. And surgery is where you really learn how to innovate. And I remember we had one of our anesthesiologists, which was in there, and he would get one of us to tube the patient, and then he'd take it out.
Let's get to a little bit.
Yeah, we don't do that anymore.
I mean, how much clinical have you done?
About 460, I think.
Yeah. Well, that's where it needs to be. When we got out in the field, our clinical was on the streets mostly. I mean, we had a lot of hours in the ER and stuff like that, but I would say most of the guys that were really adept at what they were doing got most of that on the streets.
we were taking bets on who was going to be the first licensed paramedic to start an IV legally. And I tell you what, boy, we go on a call, so I sure hope this is a bad one, but I'm ready to go. So I sit there looking at my partner, I said, you think he needs an IV? Yeah, I think he needs one. We didn't have to get permission to start a regular IV.
Well, you know, Hugh would, at the beginning, you had to call in the ER. get permission to do an IV or intubate or do anything.
Yeah.
Push drugs or anything. You have to get permission from the physician that he already started.
I had 6 standing orders when I became a paramedic. 6.
When did you start transporting patients to Richland and Lexington based on trauma? At what point did Richland become the trauma center? and
We were
get
doing it when we opened the service. If it wasn't necessarily trauma, but especially a head trauma, we were always, you had to ask the patient and the family where they wanted to go. I mean, it was one of those things, if they said I want to go to Lexington and it was a bad head injury and we're trying to explain to them why they want to go to Richland, and we take them to Richland, we could get arrested for kidnapping is what people told us at that point in time. But in the very early days, we were still designating, Richland was where we go with most head trauma. And probably by late 70s, we're pretty much, we're making that decision, as far as from just pure trauma as well. Because, they had 2 emergency beds in Lexington Hospital when we first started. So, it didn't take much to overwhelm them.
Second visits here in the state today.
Yeah.
But you didn't have to be, you don't have to go that far back either. I mean, we looked at, in '88, when I started, Lexington only had 9 beds.
Yeah.
In the entire ER. And I remember room 4. I don't know how that looked like, even years before me, but in '88, room 4 was that was their trauma room. That was the room that Lexington set aside for the most critical patients. And there wasn't but 9 to choose from.
Look at this one here, this is the state patent.
You got a structure now with captains and lieutenants and a chief. Where's the chief? Oh, the chief's over there. There's a guy that makes it all happen because it flows down from him.
Where's Drennan's stamp?
We'll get one made.
The Carolina Ambulance Service that we keep referring to is not our current Carolina Ambulance Services, so everybody.
Oh, yeah.
They are imposters.
I don't see where all these private services are getting enough patients to stay in business. Every time I look around, there's a new private ambulance service.
Now, you mentioned at first that those were transport and emergency, so when the county first started, they still doing.
Yeah, we were doing
We're doing out-of-town transport.
Right.
I don't know how many times I went.
What happened
Virginia.
when that, say that Unit 3 went out on a call? What did y'all, was there any operational?
Yeah, we had standby units. Like we had four units, Swansea, Batesburg, Airport, and Irma. And if one unit moved, the other unit had to go to some point halfway in between. And you talk about...
That sound familiar?
You talk about the middle of nowhere. Obviously, we'd go from Batesburg to the Boiling Springs at a crossroads there at Keeper Store, out in the middle of nowhere, and sit. You could go home at 11 o'clock because they weren't going to pay you overtime to sit out there. But
You ever been to Sharps Hill?
yeah.
Match we used to have here was the, what we call page 1.
Yeah, right.
The whole county outlined on one big piece of paper. That thing was about that wide and about that long.
So your crew member would open that up, and guess what, that's how you're busy.
Yeah, your visibility was almost none. You opened that thing, because they folded it in half on thin sheets of plastic.
It would, I mean, it
And you would open it up. You
there's 80% chance that your call was going to be on one of those creases. They give you the grid number on page 1, and you'd open up, and invariably, where that plastic folded over and everything, that was where you're trying to figure out where it was.
You all didn't have the map books?
Yeah, we had map books too, but we had we had the map books and did say, give you the grid in that map book, but we had this one page 1 map, that they used.
We had the Columbia
Yeah,
map
the
too.
numerical numbers on the top, and then the alphabet letters up down the side. Then drew horizontal and vertical lines. And then eventually they took that big page 1 map book and took each one of the little squares and blew it up like a notebook-sized piece of paper.
Yeah, they
Then
did
you
that.
had the first map book.
They did that right at about the time we were getting the call system, the 911 system, and everything.
And then we had people as if one of the pages tore out of that map, that one grid section, we ain't gonna need it, just throw it away. Looking up, get some details about what road and streets you were gonna be going on. You couldn't find that page, you might threw it away.
Now, where, you mentioned 911, where did the calls, how did the calls come in back?
359-2521.
I think Richland County,
That was the number, 359-2521.
I think Richland County was the first to have the 911 system, then it wasn't a matter of a few months, I don't know,
Right.
before Lexington got it.
Yeah. Well, the biggest thing, we had to name all the streets first, so that took like a couple of years, you know, before they could get all that done. 'Cause- And that, at that time, it was like Route 2, Box 88P2. So, you know, we had to get all they had to make a concerted effort to get the streets named, and that was
Address.
quite an onerous process.
Talking about dispatch, Garner, stand up. His mom was one of the first dispatchers for Lexington County. When the dispatch came out of the old jail behind the old courthouse on Main Street in Lexington.
Actually, it first started out dispatching out the coroner's office.
Yeah.
They had 2 radios at the coroner's office, and they were dispatching fire and EMS out at the coroner's
In the
office.
basement of the courthouse.
Full circle, huh?
And then they moved, when they moved the administration building, then they moved in the basement over there.
What was her name?
Mary Wilkins.
Mary Wilkins. Yeah. Bad thing about with the jailhouse over there, everybody cruises meet up over there to turn in the paperwork or either. And also, let me tell you this, back then, when we'd run a call, we'd have to ask for payment.
Oh, yeah.
It was $25 to transport.
Did y'all have the same parts of the frequent flyers back then also?
Yeah, you always.
A little bit of them, but
Not
much.
like, probably not like you do now, but, you know, we had a handful of them. Y'all probably had more.
If you give us some names, we probably are still training.
I would think most of mine are dead.
That was another piece of paperwork you had to do, because on the way to the hospital, you had to ask them for it. If you told $25 or you do partial payment or what.
Right.
We also had a receipt book in the truck too. Besides having to write the paperwork out for the call, you wrote a receipt for whatever you received from that patient. The cheapest I got was 2 cents one time. You write a receipt for 2 cents. Each person kept their own money in their pocket with their receipts, and at the end of the shift, you had to go by headquarters
And turn in
that money and that receipt. It had to be counted by somebody else.
The same way it was on Richland County, said that they rewarded us, whoever collected the most, they didn't go by the money amount. They went by the call, how many calls you collect on. So some of the calls, people wouldn't pay nothing, I'd take $1 out of my I got a free day off.
Told you they were cowboys.
Lexington County had the same thing. Most of the collections you made, whoever the highest one was, they give you what they call comp time.
Right.
They still owe me comp time.
But there was the biggest controversy, front page news and all this, when we went from $25 to $30. That was like, you talk about, we were bad mouthing Lexington Dispatch and everywhere else. And people were calling county council.
Well, in Richland County, when we first started off, it was about $8.50 at the old Columbia Ambulance. Then when Paramedic came in, we started Carolina, I think it was $17.50. $17.50.
Now it's 1,000. Something, that's some phenomenal.
Just like the exact.
500 county residents, 600 non-county residents.
Amen. You have a question?
When we started bringing up regulars, billing and stuff, what's crossing my mind, you guys were so innovative. You built EMS. How did you start the rapport within the community? Did y'all do any sort of outreach program?
Oh, yeah, that was a huge thing.
Yeah.
We realized going way back when Tom and I were first, we were on our ambulance, had an ambulance, and the two of us were in that ambulance. I remember there was one stretch that Tom and I worked 24 hours a day. We were on call, not working necessarily every hour, for 2 years without a day off. Yeah, and this includes like round trips to New York City from DC and a lot of stuff you don't need to know about.
When we first opened the EMS, you know, you got to realize there was nothing here in Lexington County. We were taking over from Carolina that had been here. And so, you know, now it's a county function. We used to go to every little festival or whatever, you know, doing blood pressure screenings, anything to just let people know that we were out there, even when it was Lexington Ambulance, Lexington County Ambulance. And, you know, we wanted to make this a career, make people knew it was a professional career, not what which a lot of them still were, bunch of medics and thugs that ended up getting jobs. But we wanted to change perception. I guess probably the biggest thing that changed the perception was the television show Emergency, which came out right about that same time, even though we had not even started a paramedic program, you know, we were getting ready to. That show came out and it gave a total different perspective, even though those were firefighters, of what was going on to treat a patient as compared to, you know, what had been going on. You know, but even now you still get, hey, ambulance boy, move your truck, you know, but you know, probably not as much as it was back when we were doing it.
Thank you.
I remember, I was working with Cheryl Bowen one time, and I don't remember what happened, but something happened, and when we got to Lexington, I remember Dr. England yelling at her and telling her not to ever use her standing orders again while he was on duty. Did you guys have that kind of resistance from the?
We were talking about that when I probably had been an EMT maybe 6 months, and I had a call and carried a patient in to Lexington, and the same doctor was on, who down the road I ended up having a decent relationship with, and he just railed at me. I think, you know, we brought the patient in, they worked on the patient was okay when we left work, but apparently the patient, you know, passed away later on in the evening or whatever, and we was back in the hospital, and he jumped on me and in my face, pointing at me, telling me I killed, his red face, if y'all ever remember him, and just telling I killed that patient and so on and so forth, and I needed to get out of this business, and man, it didn't upset me, it pissed me off, you know, but I was, you know, a little bit of a hothead in my 20s. And so I called shift supervisor, Don Simmons at the time, and I told Don, I said, hey bud, I quit. I said, I'm getting a cab, I'm going home, or either they can take me back in the unit, but I quit. He said, what went on? And I told him, and he said, don't go anywhere, I'll be right down there. And he came in and he went in and got Dr. England and walked out on the loading dock out there with him, and all I could see was him doing this to England and putting his fist up, and I could make out if you ever talk to one of my people like that. And he came back to me and said, go back to work, everything's fine. So, but no, Henry's right about, you know, you get the nurses that are the key. And the more you can get involved, and of course you guys know this better than us now, but you know, when we started, you know, bringing some of the inside emergency department people and letting them ride with us back in the old days, and they saw what we were up against sometimes, it made a huge difference in their perception of what we were doing. I mean, we take them out, as EMTs take them out in the units with us, and they're like, how do you hear a blood pressure? I can't hear a blood pressure out, you know, bouncing around like this. We don't either, we just make them up.
Like I said, some things don't change.
Take a blood pressure in the field. I wouldn't even think of using a stethoscope. Always palpate. You can get a better pressure reading with palpation than you can with stethoscope.
John Little used to have them, I say halfway decent reports. Nurses at the hospital, sometimes they'd get patients they couldn't get IV started on, and they'd ask John, because, you know, intermittently over the years, the paramedics would go in and work in the hospital like part-timers, and Little used to pick on them all the time. They asked him about coming in, and he had a patient that couldn't get any veins on, and Little would come in and he said, okay, I need 4 of you. 4? Yeah, y'all come on back here. He'd get the meal, get the prep site set and everything like that, and he said, all right, I want one of y'all walk 4 corners of the bed, and I want you to shake it while I start it. Of course, didn't go too good with the nurses.
Sounds like John.
Yep.
Paramedics are better at starting IVs than staff. Just think of what you're up against when you're in an ambulance trying to start an IV.
Any other questions, sir? What would you guys say would be the biggest change during your tenure on the streets or in administration? What was the biggest change in EMS that you guys saw?
Put bugle wagons up.
Have you done that yet, John?
You want me to tell you? No, y'all talking about the ambulances and stuff. With the forward ambulances we had here, they were just regular vans. They'd go in and block off behind the seat. Main tank, 2,000-pound tank, were laying on the floor behind the drivers and the passenger seat.
Slid it in there.
You slid it in behind those seats and you pushed them forward. The motor was sitting in the middle between the 2 seats, which would catch on fire in summertime. We had a 2,000 bag saline, that was our fire extinguisher. Pick it up and start scooting it down there and put fire out while you're going down the road. But the ambulances back then, they had capacity to hold 4 patients. You had one on the stretcher, you had one on the squad bed, and you could hang 2 over the top. But
You can
to do
imagine.
that, you had to open the side door when you took the patient in, and then hang them. One partner went out the side door and the other was at the back door. Now, if you had to check into the extremities on the foot of them patients or the lower legs while you were going down the road, if you didn't stop, pull over on the side of the road to get out, open the back door to see, because you had that much room between those stretchers hanging from the ceiling. You lay on your back on the sheet, push yourself all the way up underneath all of them, and sit up at the back doors and check them back there. You might slide back up to the front.
They'd call the dispatcher, you tell them you want to back
Back
up,
up.
they'd ask you how many patients you had.
You said 4.
And she said 4, I said, take care of it yourself. I don't care where you were, how many, or if you had CPR, they would send
Yeah,
it back up.
that was when they would send it back up.
So maybe our internationals aren't so bad after.
There's a couple of things that I would point to, and like John said, the vehicles and the equipment are phenomenally amount different from when I started, and then of course the activation of paramedics and then the development of them becoming whatever y'all do, a couple of 1,000 hours or whatever now. That's got to be the most significant thing to me. But it has gone from a kind of a low menial job to a profession.
That low menial.
That's one thing I've always been proud to say, I was an EMT paramedic all my life. I've got nothing to hide about it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm ashamed to tell some of the stories in front of y'all. The standard of care has gone so high from what it used to be. It is just remarkable.
One of the things that's neat is that there were some people back then, like these guys, Henry, and even, back in that era, that started this and had the foresight and had the dream of doing these things, and the passion for it, and that has never gone away. Because if you're going to be in this business, you've got to have some type of passion for it, or you'd be crazy to do it. So I got out of it in '85, and I've been a very, very I've led a very successful life, been a very successful person, but all of that happened, all of my career, everything that I've done since then has all been on a basis of being involved in emergency medical service. I went into medical sales and things like that, but everything I've done, and though I've got friends that are retired, and I wish I had their retirement, and I don't have it, but I wouldn't change anything. But if you stay in it, that's fine. If you decide to get out of it, it's still going to be a major influence in your life and career from now on.
How about you, Henry? You got anything that you?
Just keep up the good work. If you choose to do something else, this will have an influence on everything you'll ever do. You're gonna stay in it, make a difference. Keep the dream alive, keep going. Don't back off on it. Work as a team, I'm sure you ought to do that. It's become a whole different ballgame than when we first started. But we set the stage for it and gave it to you. Now it's your turn. I still do consulting, especially being on staff with the network. And I still get to see my friends once a year, and the friends are getting fewer, I noticed that. There's not as many of them around as there used to be. But I still get to see some. I don't know most of you guys do, other than the ones up here. But just keep up the good work, guys.
You know, you don't make a lot of, per se, according to other private sector jobs, you don't make a lot of money in EMS. And especially back in the days when we were doing it. But I stuck with it for 30 years. I got that retirement coming in now. Plus all the memories I got from that. I could name you 5 or 6 dozen people that I worked with for many years. They'd work for 4 or 5 years and they'd retire and get to draw the retirement out and then go back to work a couple months later. Those same guys are still working today. And I've been retired 14 years.
When I started in '85, Lexington EMS was only 11 years old, so I had the opportunity to work with these guys and Mike Brennan and Cato and a lot of these guys that were here in the early years, and got to hear all the stories that they would give me, and just wanted the opportunity for you guys to hear some of the same stories. So I appreciate y'all's time today.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you. We
it
appreciate
means an awful lot.
Thank you.
I think.
Amen. Thank you very much.